We were expecting someone more commercial. You're a bit of a curveball." The word slid from the gallery owner's mouth like champagne, smooth, cold, and meant to sting without seeming cruel. Alexandra didn't flinch. She stared past him, past the neatly dressed guests with their practiced smiles, and focused on her painting. All texture, all truth. A woman with a camera paused in front of it, blinked, then turned away, without a word. Behind her, a group whispered and laughed. "Is that the one Keanu's dating?" one muttered. Another chuckled, more like dragging. Alexandra's hands tightened behind her back, but she said nothing. From across the room, Keanu watched, unmoving, his gaze fixed, his jaw set. No one noticed. Not yet. They called her invisible in a room of spotlights. But she wasn't. Not to him. Not for long. It took exactly 4 minutes for everything to change, and not one of them saw it coming. The speech dragged on, self-congratulatory and hollow, as Alexandra stood quietly beside her painting in the corner. It wasn't even on the main wall. They'd moved her to the side hall at the last minute, citing a vague lighting issue. She knew better. It wasn't about light. It was about visibility. Or more precisely, erasure. This wasn't new. Years ago, she'd contributed to a major group exhibition, only to find her name missing from the printed catalog. No explanation. No correction. Another time, a local gallery abruptly canceled her solo show a week before the opening. The email said, "We don't showcase political content." No one had even asked what her work meant. At a panel discussion, she overheard a gallery rep lean in and murmur, "People don't want intense art from a white woman dating a movie star." As if her relationship was a brand, and her art had to match it. She wasn't edgy enough to be taken seriously, yet too unconventional to be palatable. They wanted her to smile, to soften, to blend in. She never did. A younger artist once leaned in at a workshop, voice low, eyes weary. "They'll let you in just enough to silence you," she'd said. Alexandra nodded, understanding more than she could explain. There had been more moments like that, subtle, sharp, exhausting. She kept painting anyway, even when her work was called aggressive, unfeminine, unmarketable. She kept showing up, even when she wasn't invited. Now, in this pristine white room filled with curated detachment, she stood beside her painting. All texture, all discomfort, all soul. Guests drifted past without pause. One influencer glanced at the canvas and turned her back with a bored smirk. Near the installation board, 2 curators whispered, "We can't afford to let this night flop. Put her work in the side hall." One said, "She's lucky she's even here." The other replied. Keanu stood across the room, unmoving, his glass untouched, his expression unreadable. But he had heard every word. He didn't rush to defend her. He never did. He knew her silence was not surrender. It was survival. She didn't need rescue. She needed to be seen. The gallery's main lights dimmed slightly. The owner's voice rose over the murmur. He listed names, offered praise, made jokes. Alexandra's name never came up. She didn't flinch. Then something happened. A young woman, barely 20, paused in front of Alexandra's piece. She didn't take a selfie, didn't filter it, just stared, then quietly raised her phone and snapped a photo. Later, she posted it with a caption, "This one made me cry." The image spread, first to 10 people, then 50, then hundreds. And while the spotlight still glared on the wrong wall, the gravity of the room had already begun to shift. The air in the gallery tightened with every passing minute. Alexandra remained where they'd tucked her, by the emergency exit, under cold lights that flattened the texture of her canvas. She didn't fidget, didn't shift. She just stood, spine long, gaze still. Behind her silence was history, not the kind displayed in frames, but the quiet trail of dismissals she carried like a second skin. She remembered being cropped out of a collaboration article, her name replaced by a male artist alone. Remembered how her grant proposal was returned unread, stamped with insufficient impact. At one point, a small gallery in Portland canceled her show without warning. A single sentence in an email. "Our patrons prefer optimism." Another time, after an exhibit in Chicago, she overheard a critic laugh behind his wine glass. People don't want to see angry art from a white woman dating a movie star. It wasn't that she was silenced outright. It was the quieter violence, being diminished just enough to remain. "You're white, but not one of them," a fellow artist once said. "You're a woman, but not the kind they put on billboards." There were moments when truth pierced through the veil. In a low-lit workshop years earlier, a younger black artist leaned in, eyes cautious. "They'll let you in just enough to silence you," she whispered. And once, during a radio interview, a critic leaned forward and said without blinking, "Smile more. Your work's intense. Soften it." But Alexandra didn't paint to soften. She painted what pulsed beneath skin, what couldn't be rinsed out. Now, as the gallery director droned on, thanking sponsors and artists, none of whom were her, Keanu stood still across the room, his hand resting lightly on a glass he hadn't touched. He didn't move toward her. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to bend the air. He'd seen this kind of theater before. The type where people clap with one hand, praise with disclaimers, where talent came second to market trends. He knew Alexandra wouldn't ask for defense. She never had. What she wanted, what she always deserved, was not protection. It was presence, recognition. A ripple started quietly. A girl, no older than 20, stood before Alexandra's painting. She didn't pose for a selfie. She just looked, long quiet, then raised her phone. The caption came seconds later. "This one made me cry." And then, like truth sliding under a locked door, it began to spread. First 10 shares, then 50, then hundreds. The gallery lights hadn't shifted, but the room had. A week passed. The gallery that had once been the epicenter of prestige now sat beneath a tidal wave of public backlash. Comments flooded their social feeds. Disappointment, anger, disbelief. They issued a statement, carefully worded, curated like the spaces they once prided themselves on. But the tone felt hollow. No one was listening. Alexandra didn't respond. She didn't post, didn't gloat. She simply continued. Her painting, the one they'd shoved into a dim hallway, now hung in a museum that had previously returned her submissions without so much as a rejection note. This time, they'd reached out. The curator wrote, "We missed something important. We'd like to make it right." She said yes, but not for them. In the quiet of that shift, the gallery curator, once so assured, so performative, sat alone at her desk. She scrolled through an inbox that had once overflowed. Now it was quiet. An unanswered interview request. A withdrawn collaboration. Silence. Her fingers hovered over a photo on her desktop, one where she smiled beside Keanu Reeves, all polished charm and borrowed relevance. She hesitated, then deleted it. Outside, a neighbor crossed the street without a word. This same woman had once boasted about her friendship with the gallery owner. Now, even eye contact was too heavy to hold. Meanwhile, the young woman who had posted Alexandra's painting, that first flicker, was invited to speak at a student showcase. She mentioned the moment without fanfare. "I saw something honest. I just wanted people to feel it, too." Alexandra didn't respond publicly to the storm, but her presence rippled wider. Art schools requested guest talks. Artists began citing her name. Her quiet refusal to bend became its own kind of protest. In one small auditorium, she sat across from a circle of students. One asked how to keep creating in a world that didn't always see you. She smiled softly. "Dignity isn't loud," she said. "It doesn't need to fight. But when it finally speaks, some people can't survive the silence." Keanu sat in the back of the room. No press. No attention. Just there. Still silent. Still present. Back at the gallery, in a now dim office, the owner opened a paused video clip from the night of the show. Alexandra stood beside her painting. The crowd had barely looked. She clicked play. The camera caught a still frame of her own face, mid-sneer, mid-dismissal. She paused it again. Nothing else needed to be said, because in the end, no one remembered what the gallery claimed. They only remembered the silence that followed, and the artist who never needed to raise her voice to be heard.